Your source for everything paranormal. Parax. Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Channeling History. You probably already know that we're the only show where we speak to the souls that made things happen, and we're brought to you on the Parax Radio Network. I'm Barry Strohm, your host, and I will be doing the channeling tonight.
And I would like to thank you all for tuning in to our show tonight. I am Connie Strohm, your co-host, and I will be asking the questions of our spirit guests tonight, all 5 of them. So please tell your friends about us so we can continue to grow our audience. Tonight will be a very interesting show. We will be interviewing individuals that participated in the sinking of the Titanic. We'll be speaking with the captain of the ship, the lookout that spotted the iceberg, Molly Brown, the woman that helped load the lifeboats, John Astor, the wealthiest person in the world at the time that he perished on the ship, and the bandmaster that played as the ship sunk. I know we're looking forward to hearing what they have to say, and I hope you are as well.
All of our shows are available on our YouTube channel and my name, Barry Strohm. Or if you'd like to download them, go to Podomatic.com and just search Channeling History. When I do the video for YouTube tonight, I'm going to be using a lot of original Titanic photographs to go with the audio. So even though you listen to it, tell your friends, have them come to the YouTube channel, because it's going to be very, very interesting what I post up there. Connie and I have started a new podcast. It's called A Weekly Message from Jesus, in which we bring messages of faith and inspiration to help guide us through the current troubled times. We're posting new messages on Wednesdays, and it's available on my websites. It's www.wordsofgodthenandnow.com or spiritspredict.com, or on our YouTube channel.
Okay, back in 1912, the passenger liner Titanic was the largest ship afloat, and because of certain design features, was thought to be unsinkable. On its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York City, while carrying an estimated 2,224 passengers and a crew, it hit an iceberg and sank, taking more than 1,500 individuals to their death. That ship carried only a total of 20 lifeboats with a total capacity of 1,178 people, about half of the passengers and crew on board. On April 14, 1912, it hit an iceberg about 375 miles south of Newfoundland at 11:40 p.m. and by 2:20 broke apart and sunk with over 1,500 people aboard. There were an estimated 705 survivors. It remains the deadliest peacetime sinking of a superliner or cruise ship. The ship was 882 feet in length with a maximum width of 93 feet, and her total height from the base of the keel to the top of the bridge was 104 feet. The vessel had 10 decks. It was powered by steam engines that were coal-burning. It had 3 propellers, 2 of which were 34 feet in diameter. I'm sorry, 34, yeah. It was capable of cruising at 24 miles per hour. At the time, the ship was the largest afloat and was considered unsinkable.
When we begin our channeling tonight, Connie will ask the questions, and I will answer the questions in the words of the spirits. If you listen to our show, you know that before we channel, we always say a prayer of protection. We all know there's evil out there, and we want to make sure that we're protected when we open a channel to the other side, as we're about to do. So Connie will now say the prayer, and we will begin to channel with our spirit guests.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle, and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our ego. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God.
Okay, we're going to start with our channeling tonight, and we're going to begin with Frederick Fleet. He was the lookout that was in the crow's nest that spotted the iceberg that struck the Titanic. So, Mr. Fleet, thank you for joining us tonight, and welcome to our show. And Connie, you got some questions for him.
Okay, first of all, where were you positioned on the ship?
The Titanic had a front mast that contained what they referred to as the crow's nest. Keep in mind, in those days there was no radar, so ships would rely on people that were placed in these crow's nests, and they would look out, and they would act as lookouts for any danger ahead.
How high above the deck were you?
The crow's nest on the Titanic was approximately 50 foot above the deck.
Okay, could you describe the weather and the moon on that night?
The weather was actually quite strange for that time of year. The water was very quiet and calm, and there was no moon. It was very difficult to spot anything, and sometimes there would even be a type of light mist in the air. So it was very difficult, and it was extremely dark on that night.
Were you by yourself up there?
No, I had one other individual with me. I would watch one side of the ship, and his responsibility was to watch the other side.
Were you aware that there were icebergs in the area?
Yes, we'd been told before we started our shift. They said that there were icebergs in the area and that we should keep a sharp watch.
Okay, how close to the ship was the iceberg when you saw it?
When I saw it approaching, it was like this black mass, and in the black, the water was black, the sky was black, and it was extremely dark, and I saw this big dark form in front of us. I would estimate at the time that we saw it, it was approximately 5 foot in front of us, or 500 feet in front of us.
Not surprising with those conditions. How much time elapsed from the time you saw the iceberg until it collided with the ship?
Well, we were traveling at a very high rate of speed. So the estimates are that within 37 to 40 seconds, we first struck the iceberg. It scraped the side of the ship, and we actually thought that we had missed the iceberg. But apparently, it caused great damage.
Did you have binoculars to use?
We did not. On that night, there was a misunderstanding, and we could not open the cabinet that contained the binoculars. We tried to find the key, but the officer of the deck told us to just simply go and use your eyes, that since it was so dark, binoculars probably would not have made a difference.
Okay. Since the order was for women and children first, how was it you were saved?
When we started to load and drop the lifeboats, I was in charge of trying to lead the women and children. When the boat that I was working with was prepared to be lowered, the lifeboat was not anywhere near capacity. So somebody had to know how to operate the lifeboat and to know the procedures once we were on the water. So I joined the women and children in that lifeboat, and that's why I was saved.
Yeah. Okay, do you think if you'd had the binoculars it would have made a difference?
I think it would have. It is a very difficult thing. Sometimes I blame myself for not being alert enough at the time. We were trying to do our best up there. My friend and I, we were having conversations and we were talking, and it was very, very cold. So we were also trying to keep warm. But it was just like all these difficult conditions came together. I sincerely wish that we would have been able to see the iceberg earlier and avoid it. It has been on my conscience, and I just wish I could have done more.
Okay. Next, we're going to have Captain Smith. Barry can tell you a little bit about him.
Okay, Captain E.J. Smith was in charge of the Titanic. He often was in charge of large vessels. He was considered a highly competent individual to be given control of the ship of the size of Titanic. So we're honored tonight to have his spirit with us. Captain Smith, welcome to our show.
Okay, Captain, could you tell us about the Titanic?
For its time, the Titanic was a magnificent ship. It was to be the largest and fastest ship on the seas. At that time, things were very, very different than they are today. We were being challenged by the Cunard lines, and it was very competitive. The ship was magnificent. The first-class facilities were the best ever built. We had swimming pools, we had Turkish baths, we had everything that a first-class passenger should ever want. We had others in second class, and in the lower decks, we had third-class people, which were traveling at a very low cost. That deck was crowded with many people. The Titanic, when you see the pictures, was absolutely magnificent.
Yeah, Captain, had the Titanic been taken out for a test run before your voyage?
No. We had outfitted it, but we had done some minor testing of it. But the owners were very anxious for us to get it on the water because so many people were interested in seeing it, and we thought that we really could set a very quick time for crossing the Atlantic.
So you were trying to set a speed record?
We weren't intentionally trying to set a speed record, but we were traveling at top speed. Well, I guess maybe we were trying to set one, because in those days, the tickets were very expensive in first class. There was no air travel available, so we really controlled how people would cross the ocean. The faster we could do it, the more people we would attract.
Had you been warned that there were icebergs in the area?
Yes, we had been warned. But we considered the Titanic to have all of the most up-to-date features and to be the safest ship that was ever on the seas. We actually advertised it as being unsinkable. Obviously, we were very mistaken in that. And I was warned there were icebergs, but I felt that they were not going to be large ice chunks as like we encountered. There was a lot of small ice in the area, and before it got dark, I observed that there was much small pieces of ice, but I did not see any large icebergs when I retired for the night. So I felt that we were safe. If I had realized the size of some of the icebergs that were out there, I would have made a decision to lower our speeds.
Okay. Was your crew trained in the use of lifeboats?
We were trying very hard to get the first voyage in. We knew that Cunard had ships that they were preparing, and we wanted to be able to be first to cross the ocean with the quality of life that we had on the ship, and we were pushing very hard to get it done. We really did not spend much time in the use of the lifeboats or training the crew to use them, because we simply felt that they were not there, that they were basically decorative and that we would never have to use them. We were even shorthanded with the number of lifeboats. As you said in your introduction, we only had enough for about half of the people that were on board. I thank God that there were not more people, because sadly, if there had been more people, the death toll would have been much higher. But the crew did the best they could, but we had been lax in training them. Many of the lifeboats that we dropped from the ship were actually only half filled to capacity. In all of the rush to get the lifeboats launched, in a lot of instances, they could have put more people on board them.
Did you take command of loading the lifeboats?
I left that to my more junior officers. I did watch, and I tried to help, but it was really not one of my responsibilities at the time. You have to realize that the initial inspection of the ship predicted that we only had like an hour to an hour and a half to get the lifeboats loaded and on their way. Once a ship starts to list or break in half or to sink, to truly sink at a rapid rate, it is very difficult to get the lifeboats safely into the water. So I know the officers were pushing very hard to get the boats out as fast as they could. As it turned out, we had a little more time than we thought. It was actually about 3 hours from the time that we hit the iceberg until the ship went under. But it was a very difficult time for everyone. Many of the people did not know where to go. We had not instructed them, and I take the blame for that as well. Today, when you get on a cruise ship, much time is spent telling the passengers where to go and how to access safety equipment. I think the main reason really was we thought the ship was unsinkable. Sadly, we found out the hard way that it was not.
Yeah. Was there any attempt made to save the third-class passengers?
The officers were making decisions as to who would have access to the boats. Priority was given to the first-class passengers because they were in the top decks where the lifeboats were located. So it was easy for them to come to the locations and to be loaded into the ships. Second-class passengers were basically one deck down, and it was easier for them to access the lifeboats as well. Third-class passengers were in lower decks, and it was very difficult for them to come to the upper decks where the lifeboats were located. We did try to bring some of the third-class passengers up towards the end, but at that point the ship was listing, and was preparing to go under. The loss of life in that class is something that has haunted me greatly.
Yeah. Was there anything that you could have done to save more lives?
We could have done more training with the crew. We could have trained the passengers how to react to an emergency situation such as this. We could have had better warning systems throughout the ship. But keep in mind, once again, we were thinking that the ship was unsinkable.
Okay, we have somebody in the chat room who would like to know what you thought of the movie about the Titanic.
I thought a lot of it was garbage, to be honest with you. The sinking of the ship was absolutely terrible. The water was 28 degrees when people hit it. So very few of the people that dove into the water were saved. I thought that the movie was very poorly done. I will just leave it like that.
Okay. Did you die in the sinking of the ship?
Yes, I did.
How did you pass?
I returned to the bridge, and so many of my officers did as well. We had gotten as many of the lifeboats off as we could, and we simply waited for the inevitable to happen. When the ship broke in half, we were thrown, and many of them were injured, but it was not long until we were underwater.
Was there anything that could have been done to prevent the collision?
That has been studied for many, many years. We could have trained people better. We could have perhaps used floodlights on the front of the ship in these conditions. We could have maybe put more lookouts up. There were many things that we could have done, but we simply did not do them.
Okay. How were you judged when you arrived on the other side?
When I arrived on the other side, there were many other souls with me. The guides, did not judge me harshly for what happened. I really had tried to do my best, but it was very limited what anyone could have done. So I have been judged. I understand what the shortcomings were, and I have apologized to many of the souls that are here with me that died on the ship. Captain Smith, thank you very much for that. We really appreciate all of your comments. The next soul that we are going to interview is John Jacob Astor IV. Mr. Astor was one of the wealthiest people in the world at the time. His net worth in today's dollars would have been well over $3 billion. He was on the ship with his young wife. She was pregnant, and Mr. Astor passed along with the other 1,500 people. So, Mr. Astor, thank you for joining us tonight. It is an honor to have you with us, and Connie has a few questions for you.
Just a few. Mr. Astor, could you tell us a little about yourself?
My family had been very wealthy through real estate investments. We had done many things to generate net worth. We were involved with some railroads. The Waldorf Astoria was a hotel project that my family did. We were indeed in the upper class of people at that time. It was a time that there were people that had great money, and there was a time that there were incredibly poor people. I had divorced my wife and had gotten a lot of bad publicity for it. I married my beautiful wife when she was 18 years old, and we had gone to Europe for an extended honeymoon. We had a wonderful time in Europe, but we decided that it was time to return home when we felt that the maiden voyage of the Titanic would be a wonderful experience. We had looked at the facilities and we found out that there were none better. White Star Lines had gone out of their way to make this ship the most beautiful and best and highest level of service of anything available. When we got our tickets, they were quite expensive. While it might be hard to believe, a ticket in first class on the Titanic would be over $90,000 of today's money. So, very few of us were really in a category that we could travel first class. And I will say, until we hit the iceberg, it was a wonderful experience.
Did you manage to get your wife onto a lifeboat?
Yes. We were in the top cabins, so we were very close to the lifeboats. Everybody in the crew knew who we were because they had catered to us. Having someone of my wealth and social status on board the ship was a great selling point for them. So when the orders were given to load the lifeboats and to lower them immediately, I did manage to get my wife onto one of the lifeboats, and she was saved.
Why didn't you go with her?
The order was given for women and children to be into the lifeboats. Certain crew members were being selected because they needed to operate the lifeboats. I asked if I could go with her, but I was told that they wanted to just simply focus on the women and children. I said, okay, and I thought that perhaps I would be able to get onto one of the other lifeboats that were loaded at a later time. Sadly, that did not happen.
Was her lifeboat filled to capacity?
Yes, her lifeboat was relatively full. So that was why I backed off. I did not attempt to pull rank or any other, shall we say, influences. I felt that it was really important that the women and children be saved first.
You were a good man. When you stayed behind, did you know that you were most likely going to perish?
At first, I thought that we would be okay. But as the ship began to list and began to take on more water, it became very obvious to all of us that the ship was going to go down. When I stayed behind, I knew I would be at great risk. But I did feel that I would be able to get onto one of the later lifeboats.
Yeah. Exactly. How did you die?
When the ship started to break apart, it moved very violently, and I knew that the end was in sight. I had a life jacket on, so I jumped from the ship into the icy water. I lasted maybe 10 minutes at the most. The water was so cold that I think my heart just stopped beating. It was a difficult way to pass, but it did go fairly rapidly.
Was this part of your life plan?
Yes, when I arrived over here, I was told that it was part of my life plan. That even though I had been given great riches, I would also be given a short life. I lived a wonderful life. I did try to help others. My guides were quick to point out that I should have helped more with my great wealth. But I didn't. When I come back, I think that I will try to prepare a life plan in which I will be able to help others. The thought of so many people passing still bothers me today. I'm very sorry that the majority of people that were saved were the wealthy. Once again, I wish that there would have been more to do for the people that were in the third class decks. None of us ever thought that this was going to happen. And I think that many lessons were learned by the shipping companies in the construction of future ships. But sadly, I did perish on the boat, along with an incredible number of very brave people. So I thank you for asking me to come tonight, and I hope that my answers help shed some light on what was taking place on that terrible night. Thank you, Mr. Astor. We really appreciate you coming through for us tonight. We're going to take a little break now. We will be back in about 3 minutes, and we will continue, and we will be speaking with the unsinkable Molly Brown.
Don't go away. Channeling History will return right after these brief messages.
In order for the light to shine so brightly, the darkness must be present. Tune in every Monday at 10 o'clock for Dark Sun Rising on the Para-X Radio Network. From Haunted Road Media comes an exciting new novel by author Marla Brooks, Soul Connection, A Deadly Obsession. Two lost souls, ripped apart by murder in another century, find each other again in the present, only to discover that the murderer has followed them through time. Can their love save them, or will history repeat itself? Find out in this captivating new novel by Marla Brooks, Soul Connection, A Deadly Obsession. Available now on Amazon.com and at BarnesandNoble.com.
You've no doubt heard of Tango and Cash, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. Perhaps it takes two to tango. Well, now, on the first and third Thursdays of each month, there's a show called Tango and Friends at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Para-X Radio Network with your host, Bruce Tango. And yes, there will be at least two to tango on each episode, sometimes even more. There's going to be lots of topics and lots of guests you'll all know and lots of surprises. Tango and Friends every first and third Thursday of the month at 8 p.m. right here on the Para X Radio Network. Have you ever wondered what Jesus and his followers would say if you could receive their messages today? In his new book, Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits, channeler and author Barry Strohm answers those questions for you. Using his gift of spirit communication, he brings you messages from such Holy Spirits as Moses, John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Jesus, and even Mother Teresa and the Reverend Billy Graham. They discuss topics that are important for contemporary life in these troubled times. Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers. Signed copies are available on the author's website, spiritspredict.com. After reading this book, you will never again say, "What would Jesus say or do?" Welcome back to Channeling History. Now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Welcome back, everybody, to this very, very interesting show. We're going to now talk with a young lady. Margaret Brown is better known as the unsinkable Molly Brown. She was one of the heroes of the sinking, and she is here with us tonight. Connie.
Hi, Molly. How about if you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I came from a very wealthy family, and we were quite socially prominent. We knew people like John Astor that you were just talking with, and we thought that it would be a wonderful experience to be on the maiden voyage of the most magnificent ship that was ever built. And I will say, until we hit the iceberg, it was a wonderful journey. However, it was a total shock to find out that they were telling us that the ship was going to sink and that we needed to get into the lifeboats. After I came back from surviving the ship, I was actually fairly famous for what I had done. Since there were so few survivors, I guess they needed somebody to make a hero of. I even used the fame that I gained to run for the Senate at one time. I'd always been very active, and I wanted to try to help others. I realized that I had been blessed by being saved, where so many had perished.
Okay, how exactly did you find out that the ship was going to be sinking? I mean, who informed you of that?
Well, in the beginning, the ship's officers were knocking on our doors, and they were telling us that there had been an incident and that we needed to gather on the upper deck near the lifeboats. In the beginning, they did not tell us that it was inevitable that the ship was going to sink. They simply told us to come to the upper decks and to wait in the area of the lifeboats, and that we would be updated on the situation. Finally, the Captain Smith came, and he said that the damage to the ship was much greater than anyone anticipated, that the lower levels were being flooded, and it was inevitable that the ship was going to sink. he gave the order for the people to enter the lifeboats and to lower them away as soon as they were loaded. So it was really the message from Captain Smith that told me that the boat was going to sink.
Yeah. So how about if you tell our listeners the role that you played in loading the lifeboats?
There was much confusion. Nobody knew really how to handle the situation. It became very obvious that the crew had not been trained, and many of the crew members were very reluctant to take charge and to order the people around. There was, needless to say, there was huge amounts of confusion. The order was given there would be women and children first. Many of the women did not want to leave their husbands. They were sobbing, they were crying. It was a terrible time. Mothers and children were the first to get into the boats. I tried to take charge by speaking with them and telling them and pointing out which of the lifeboats they should enter, and that they needed to do it immediately. We did tell some of them that we felt the men would be following in the later boats, but it was priority to get the women and children loaded.
Yeah, so
many of them panicked, and many of the boats were lowered at less than full capacity. When I arrived back on shore, I actually found out that only about half of the lifeboat capacities had been used. The lifeboats that I was trying to help load, we did get many people into, but it was a mass confusion.
Was there anyone in particular who officially took charge of loading the lifeboats?
No. I think the senior officers made the best attempt at it, but it was total confusion. Once again, we were doing the unthinkable. No one ever thought this ship was going to go down.
Yeah. Were you prepared to go down with the ship?
Yes, I was. Some of the officers told me to get into the lifeboat. They said it would do no good. It would be far better for them if my life was saved.
Okay. What did you think of your nickname, the Unsinkable Molly Brown?
I kind of liked it. I'd never thought about it like that, but they were looking for people to be heroes. There were so few survivors that when people told my story, they built everything up, and I really kind of became the hero of the sinking of the Titanic.
Okay. Tell us about your life after the Titanic incident.
I tried to make the most of what little fame I was given. I was also trying to get women in positions of power in government. I was in favor of women voting, and I tried to use my notoriety to give women much strength. Sometimes I succeeded, sometimes I didn't. But I thank you for having me here tonight, and I hope that people understand that life can end very rapidly. Okay. Thank you, Molly, for that. I guess I can call you Molly at this point. Okay. One of the true bravery stories of the sinking of the Titanic was the band. Tonight we are blessed to have Wallace Hartley with us. He was the bandmaster, and he is here to answer some of the questions.
Wallace, why did you choose to play as the ship was sinking?
We knew that the women and children had priority. We also knew that as crew members, we would not be in the top group to be loaded into the lifeboats. We wanted to try to calm people. We thought that if we played our music, it would help to keep them calm, and it would assist them in loading the lifeboats and in making the very difficult choices that had to be made.
Okay, one of our listeners would like to know, what songs did they play while the ship was sinking?
We tried to play hymns. We thought that with people about to face their Maker, that we would try to sing, or we would try to play songs that would bring them closer to God as they were preparing themselves for their passings. We did play some other classical music, but I think the people really wanted to hear the hymns.
I think that was a great choice. Did you dress in your finest clothing?
We all put on our tuxedos. We thought that if we were going to go out, we would go out as true gentlemen. We wanted to set the example of calmness for everyone. Many people did not truly believe that the ship was going to sink. Many that remained were husbands who had loaded their wives and families onto the lifeboats. The realization that they would never see them again on this side was very difficult. Many people, when they face this type of situation, turn to God as they have never turned to them before in their lifetimes. We knew that it was going to be chaotic, and we thought that we could try to bring a sense of normality to all of the individuals in their final hour. I hope that we succeeded. It was a very difficult time for us as well. We all had family. Some of us were very young. When we signed on as musicians, we never in our wildest dreams imagined that it would be a ship to our death.
What was the final song that you played?
The final song that we played was Nearer My God to Thee. It is a wonderful hymn, and we thought that it would bring comfort to those that had fully realized now that they were in the final moments of their lives.
Yeah.
It was just a terrible time.
Yeah.
We tried to keep up a brave front, but we knew that our time was coming as well.
Could you describe the final moments for us?
In the final moments of the sinking, we were thrown about violently because the ship actually broke in half when it began its final descent into the ocean. When that happened, many of the people were ejected into the water. We were thrown against the side of the ship, and I was thrown into the water. I did not last long in that cold water, and thankfully I passed very rapidly. The people at the end realized that there was no way they were going to be saved. Many of them were praying. Many were speaking the Lord's Prayer. And many were trying to make final peace with their God. The officers tried to make it appear as that they were as brave as could be. In the final moments, a lot of the confusion had ended, and many just wanted to remain by themselves. It was the culmination of many lives. I think that we did actually help some. We did play as we had never played before. Many of us had never played music together before. It was a very sad time. I still look back at it and feel that maybe we could have done more. But when I finally passed, my soul was accepted into heaven, and I was told that our actions would be rewarded in our final judgment.
Was this a part of your life plan?
It was. It's hard to believe, but it was part of my life plan. It was to be a final test of my strength and of my love and devotion to God as I passed in those icy waters.
Okay, that's pretty much the questions that Barry and I had, but I have a couple questions from the chat room that I will bring out now that we still have a little bit of time. One of them was for you, Wallace. What brand of instruments did your band play?
I had they supplied us instruments, and they were high quality instruments. The piano was a Steinway, and I'm really not sure who made the violin. We brought some of our instruments with us, but obviously we couldn't bring the larger pieces.
Yeah, okay, and then there was a question for the captain. Captain, are you still here with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, one of our listeners would like to know if you had any final words for your crew.
Yes, I thanked them. I told them that I was sorry that we had made mistakes. I thanked them for being brave in those final moments. And I thanked them for realizing from the start that their lives would be sacrificed to save the women and children first.
Okay. We would like to thank all of you wonderful spirits for coming through for us tonight. We've learned a lot about how ordinary citizens can perform extraordinary acts of bravery. May God bless all of you, and thank you for coming here.
Yes, thank you so much. We appreciate this. The Titanic is something that many people have many questions about, even to this day, even took place over 100 years ago. So anyway, next week we're going to be channeling the Archangel Gabriel. We have channeled him before, and we will give anyone in the chat room the opportunity to ask questions of the Archangel. You can submit your questions and suggestions for future guests through our email. It's channelinghistory on parax@gmail.com. My 7th book, Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. It's also available on Kindle for an immediate download. Works out well for people in foreign countries so they don't have to go through the problems of shipping. Signed copies of all my books are only available on my websites, spiritspredict.com and wordsofgodthenandnow.com. My previous book, Spirit Speak, Channeling the Life of Jesus, told the story of his life, and the current book tells of his messages and the messages of those closest to him as he walked the earth. All of our shows are available on our YouTube channel in my name, Barry Strohm, or if you want to download them, you can go to Podomatic.com and search Channeling History. When I put the YouTube posting up on this show, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be including a large collection of photography that was taken of the Titanic itself. We have pictures of all the individuals that we channeled tonight, and I think that it will add a lot to it. Connie and I, we've started a new podcast. It's called A Weekly Message from Jesus. It's also available on our YouTube channel, where we have posted over 140 videos. We hope that you enjoyed the show tonight. We hope that you join us next week to hear from Archangel Gabriel. You can rest assured that he will have wonderful messages and that it will be a very enjoyable time. So thank you for listening. Please join us Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the ParaX Radio Network when we bring you the people that have made history. So good night.
You all have a wonderful week, and God bless you all.
Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode as... Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.